Rhain Voss died twice, once in a random accident on Earth, and once as a pathetic, abused disciple in the lowest sect of a ruthless cultivation world. Transmigrating into the world where the strong rule as gods and the weak are trampled into the dirt. Mercy is just another word for suicide. The original Rhain Voss learned this truth the hard way when he was beaten to death in a filthy alley by his fellow disciples for simply looking at them the wrong way. A cold, pragmatic soul from Earth awakens in that broken body who is done being a victim. Fortunately, he didn't come empty-handed. Ding. Sign and system initialized. First sign, unsuccessful. Reward, Abyssal's sovereign physique. Chapter 41. Slaughter begins. The level 4 man collapsed heavily onto the damp soil, his hands grasping uselessly at his neck. The light in his bulging eyes faded after struggling for a while. Morbin, the level 3 and level 6 men screamed simultaneously. Seeing their companions slaughtered right before their eyes sent a jolt of raw terror through their minds. Rhain did not give them a single second to mourn. He shot forward, aiming straight for the level 6 leader. "You bastard!" The level 6 leader roared, his eyes filled with sheer panic and burning rage. He madly circulated his level 6 essence, raising his serpentine blade to form a thick, glowing crimson shield in front of his chest. Rhain simply swung the stolen blade. Crack! The dense crimson defense shattered like brittle glass under the crushing physical force. The ordinary blade cleaved downward, snapping the serpentine weapon in two before slicing diagonally across the leader's chest and neck. The level 6 man's eyes were filled with the same unwillingness and resentment as the young disciple. His body was ruthlessly split open by the sword. He collapsed backward, dead before his back even hit the ground. Seeing the strongest among them annihilated in a single breath, the weakest level 3 man was completely terrorized. He had no time to wonder why an Azure Cloud sect disciple possessed such monstrous strength. He only knew one thing. They had provoked a devil. Panic overrode his loyalty. With a pathetic cry, he turned around and hysterically tried to run. "Did I allow you to leave?" A sharp gust of wind brushed past his ears. Rhain appeared directly in his path, blocking his escape. The man stumbled to a halt, nearly tripping over his own feet as the cold steel of the blood-stained sword rested against his neck. "Have you seen a girl with white hair?" Rhain asked. His voice was as chilling as the wind of winter months. The man shook his head desperately. "No, I haven't seen her. Please, I swear I..." Squelch. Rhain flicked his wrist. The cold blade slid across the man's neck. The third body slumped to the forest floor, joining his companions in hell. From start to finish, he had slaughtered a group of essence condensation experts using nothing more than a snatched, common-grade sword. He casually tossed the bloodied blade aside. Bria and Hale stood transfixed in place. 3 essence condensation realm experts. All dead. Rhain had killed them as effortlessly as a man chopped vegetables. And he didn't even blink. Just how many people has he killed to become this cold-blooded? This was the person they were following. Meanwhile, Rhain simply stood there. "Our Rhain," she called out to him, her voice trembling so badly it barely sounded like her own. Hearing the voice, Rhain turned his head and looked at the two shivering. "Check their bodies," Rhain instructed with eerie calmness, his voice unaffected by the gruesome slaughter surrounding him. "See if they have anything good on them." He casually turned his gaze back toward the next green dot. "Once you have taken what is useful, we will keep moving. We have already wasted enough time here." Bria and Hale jolted as if they had been violently struck by lightning. They hurriedly scrambled to comply, not daring to hesitate for even a fraction of a millisecond. Rhain looked at the location tracking tails him on. Approximately 100 miles away, there's a cluster of green dots. It's a group. Maybe Saris is also there. Underscore on a massive, incredibly desolate valley. The environment here was entirely devoid of the colossal ancient trees. A suffocating, heavy heat hung in the air, making the already oppressive gravity of the hollow realm feel even more unbearable. Standing at the absolute peak of a towering red cliff, looking down at the desolate valley below, was Vargas. Standing directly beside him was an older man draped in the opulent crimson and gold robes of the Barlow family. He was the level 9 head elder of the Barlow family. Suddenly, the Barlow elder's expression shifted. He quickly reached into his crimson robes and pulled out a small, intricately carved circular jade plate. It was a life soul compass, a precious artifact used to monitor the life forces of their family's important members. In the entire Grey Mist town, only their Barlow family had one. The moment he looked down at the compass, his face revealed an expression of ugliness. Garrick, Pyron, Morbin. He squeezed the names through his tightly clenched teeth. All three of them, dead at the exact same time. The veins on his forehead bulged to the point of bursting as an explosive, murderous aura erupted from his body. "Who?" he roared, his voice echoing violently against the yellow rocks. Who could have done this? Vargas didn't even flinch at the violent outburst. His dead eyes lazily shifted toward the enraged Barlow elder. "Use your brain," Vargas sneered, his voice dripping with chilling indifference. To slaughter 3 essence condensation cultivators simultaneously, an ordinary elder couldn't possibly achieve that. Vargas narrowed his eyes, a bloodthirsty glint flashing within his pupils. It must be Torin, or Roderick Graves. Vargas let out a low, sadistic chuckle, completely unbothered by the loss of their allied forces. Those 2 old dogs are the only ones on their side with enough raw strength to pull off such a swift execution. The Barlow elder's chest heaved violently, his eyes burning with absolute venom. "Torin, Roderick, I will skin them alive. I will tear their flesh from their bones." Vargas turned his gaze back to the desolate valley. "Save your anger. When we inevitably cross paths with Roderick and Torin, I will let you personally break their limbs. You can torture them to your heart's content before I crush their throats." The Barlow expert gritted his teeth and gave a stiff nod. Without another word, the 2 men turned and walked away. Behind them, the rocky plateau was entirely painted in blood. Behind them, left to rot among the red and yellow rocks, lay the mutilated bodies of 2 Azure Cloud elders and a Graves family youth. The slaughter had begun from both sides. Rhain had been moving steadily for almost 2 hours, heading relentlessly southwest toward the massive cluster of green dots he had spotted on the tracking talisman. Behind him, Bria and Hale pushed their speed to the absolute limits just to keep up with his pace. Rhain, suddenly, Bria slowed, her gaze dropping to the glowing jade pendant in her palm. "Someone is rapidly coming to our side." Rhain retrieved his own talisman. True to her word, a solitary green blip was streaking across the projection, hurtling directly toward their coordinates. "They are heading straight for us." Hale's brows furrowed. Could they be chased by the Iron Peak sect? Rhain's dark gray irises narrowed slightly. "Let's go," Rhain ordered calmly. "We will meet them halfway." Bria and Hale suppressed their fears and sprinted desperately after him. The distance between them and the rapidly approaching green dot closed in the span of a few minutes. Swoosh! A figure violently burst through the thick underbrush, stumbling awkwardly into the small clearing before them. Bria and Hale immediately raised their weapons, their nerves stretched taut. But when they clearly saw the person's face, both of their eyes widened in sheer disbelief. "Victor!" Bria cried out. The former top disciple looked wretched. His deep purple inner disciple robes were shredded and stained with patches of dark mud and fresh blood. Hearing his name, Victor snapped his head up and looked at them. "Rhain, Bria, Hale!" he gasped. A wave of relief washed over his pale face. But the relief only lasted for a fraction of a second before his face revealed a look of extreme fear and worry. "We need to find an elder," Victor shouted, weakly falling to his knees. "Instructor Marin, she is in danger." Chapter 42. Blood-sucking crimson plant Bria and Hale were stunned. Instructor Marin was in danger? She was level 5 in essence condensation realm. Rhain stepped forward, his composed demeanor cutting through Victor's frantic panic. What happened to Instructor Marin? Bria tightly gripped the hilt of her sword, her face instantly draining of all color. Victor, what is going on? Are you being chased by Iron Peak sect? No. Victor furiously shook his head, his eyes widening with lingering horror. It wasn't an enemy. It was a plant. A plant. Hale repeated, completely bewildered. Yes. Victor quickly spat out the situation with a trembling voice. He and Marin had been teleported close to each other, along with 3 other disciples. All of them grouped up quickly and started moving through a dense ravine. They hadn't realized the danger until it was too late. Victor had stepped right into the trap. He stepped on a root, and massive vines suddenly appeared, trying to drag him to the center. To save him, Instructor Marin didn't hesitate to throw herself into the center of the trap to forcibly pry the vines off him. But in doing so, she herself dragged into the center of the danger in his place. As he spoke, tears filled Victor's eyes, his face full of self-blame and indignation. He dropped his head, burying his face in his trembling hands. It's all my fault. If I hadn't been so blind. Rhain's expression had turned solemn. Marin had stood before Roderick Graves to shield him at the sect gates. She had been willing to face a level 9 essence condensation expert to protect him. Everyone who treated him well, he would forever remember. Take me there, Rhain ordered coldly. Victor froze, blinking through his tears. What? Rhain, you don't understand. That plant is beyond our control. Even Instructor Marin, a level 5 essence condensation expert, could not save herself. We need an elder's help. If we go back there without an elder, we're just throwing our lives away. Rhain took a single step forward. Take me there. Rhain's voice dropped half an octave, carrying an absolute, undeniable authority that left no room for negotiation. Take me there right now, or you will be the one solely responsible for her death. A terrifying, suffocating aura released from his body, locking Victor completely in place. Victor's heart trembled. Bria also shouted urgently from rear. Victor, we don't know where we will find elders. Trust Rhain, if he is saying it, he can definitely save Instructor Marin. Victor looked into Rhain's completely fearless eyes, and his eyes flashed with the memories of him being defeated by Rhain. Maybe he could really save Marin. He gritted his teeth and scrambled to his feet. Follow me. Underscore. Half an hour later. A deep, fog-covered ravine. The moment they arrived, the foul stench of rotting vegetation slammed straight into their brains. Massive, writhing, blood-red, tentacle-like plants covered the ravine walls. Instructor Marin stood back to back with 3 exhausted inner disciples. Dozens of spiked, blood-red vines whipped at them relentlessly from all directions. Most of the attacks were faced by Marin. She was heavily injured. Blood stained her robes all the way down her ribs. Her essence was draining at a terrifying speed. Instructor Marin! Victor screamed. Marin snapped her head up. When she saw Victor returning with reinforcements, a flicker of hope flashed in her eyes. But when she saw it was only Rhain, Bria, and Hale, that hope turned into absolute despair. Run! Marin screamed, her voice cracking under the strain of holding back the relentless vines. Victor, are you stupid? Why did you bring them here? Run! Rhain stepped to the very edge of the ravine, his eyes locking onto the writhing mass of tentacles. Rhain, do not attack them. Marin yelled frantically, severing another vine that immediately began to regrow. Physical attacks are useless. If you cut them, they only multiply and split. It's a trap meant to exhaust us until we are drained dry. Get out of here and find Torin. Bria and Hale drew their weapons, but their hands were trembling violently. If a level 5 condensation expert was entirely helpless, what could they possibly do? Rhain completely ignored Marin's warning. Deep within his dark, abyssal gray irises, faint golden light ignited. Eyes of truth. His gaze pierced straight through the dense mist and overlapping tentacles, locking onto the absolute center of the ravine deep underground. There, buried deep within the center of the ravine, was a single, massive core root. It was the source controlling the dozens of vines. "Found you," Rhain whispered. Swoosh. The next second, his figure abruptly moved. Shadow, flicker step. He stepped directly off the cliff, plummeting into the sea of blood-red tentacles. "Rhain and oh!" Maren shrieked, horror flooding her face. The moment Rhain entered the danger zone, the crimson vein vines reacted violently. Sensing a new, incredibly dense source of essence, dozens of thick, spiked tentacles whipped toward him from all directions. But Rhain's speed was completely beyond their comprehension. He flickered through the tentacles, easily dodging the incoming vines with absolute precision, slipping through gaps that were mere inches wide. The main plant beneath the earth instantly registered the incomprehensible depth of the energy entering its domain. It was like a starving beast suddenly smelling a feast fit for a king. Instantly, the plant shifted its entire focus. The vines attacking Maren and the three exhausted disciples abruptly stopped. Like a swarm of bloodthirsty vipers, every single tentacle in the ravine turned away from Maren's group and surged wildly toward Rhain. They whipped Rhain from countless directions at once, completely blotting out the sky. The sudden release of pressure caused Maren's legs to give out. She collapsed to her knees, panting heavily, her eyes glued to the dark figure darting through the storm of vines. As the cluster of thick vines attempted to completely entrap Rhain, he simply pulled his left fist back. Using pure physical strength, he punched straight through the blockage. Bang! The massive tentacles were aggressively blown apart by the sheer concussive force of his physical blow, clearing a direct path to the center of the ravine. Rhain landed heavily on the ground, standing directly above the core root he had identified with the eyes of truth. The core root possessed an incredibly tough, almost indestructible bark-like exterior designed specifically to withstand the desperate attacks of dying cultivators. But Rhain didn't need to break the exterior. Rhain's dark essence surged towards his fist again. It did not radiate outward. It gathered inward, compressing to an infinitesimally small point. The remaining hundreds of vines converged on him, dropping from the sky like a blood-red waterfall to crush him into a paste. Rhain drove his right fist directly into the ground, aiming for the buried core. Void fist. His knuckles collided with the indestructible exterior of the main plant. But the compressed, dark energy did not explode on the surface. It phased through the thick, armored bark, bypassing the physical defense entirely. It traveled directly into the very center of the plant's heart. And then it detonated. Boom! A loud explosion echoed. The effect was instantaneous. The hundreds of massive, blood-red tentacles plummeting toward Rhain abruptly froze in midair. A horrifying screech, sounding almost like a dying animal, reverberated from the ground beneath Rhain's feet. In the blink of an eye, the sinister red glow pulsing through the veins of the plants vanished, turning pale green. The entire network of the crimson plant was instantly annihilated. Chapter 43. Crimson core seeds. The massive, blood-red tentacles that had blotted out the sky suddenly went entirely limp. Thud, thud, thud. Hundreds of thick, spiked vines crashed heavily against the rocky floor of the ravine, causing dust and smoke to rise in the air. Rhain! As the dust settled, a sharp cry broke the silence of the ravine. Maren forcibly pushed herself up from the ground. Completely ignoring the grisly wounds on her body, she stumbled through the sea of dead vines toward the center of the ravine. Rhain, are you? She choked out in dust, her eyes desperately searching the settling dust. Are you all right? Standing amidst the withered remains of the core root, Rhain slowly turned around. He looked at Maren's panicked expression and gave a slight, reassuring nod. I am fine, Instructor Maren, Rhain said calmly. Rhain, Maren wanted to scold him, but her vision suddenly darkened. The crimson vein vines had not merely drained her essence to the point of exhaustion. Every time those spiked tentacles had lashed across her body, They had actively sucked away her blood. She had lost a massive amount of blood, and surviving this long was a pure miracle born of her desperate desire to protect the disciples. Now that the fatal threat was eradicated, her body completely shut down. Marin's body swayed, her eyes rolling back as she collapsed directly toward the hard, rocky ground. Swoosh! Rhain quickly appeared beside her, his arm wrapping firmly around her shoulders to support her weight. He gently lowered her to a seated position against a smooth rock. Her breathing was dangerously weak, and her skin was alarmingly cold to the touch. With a flick of his wrist, a flawless, perfectly round pill materialized in his free hand. An uncommon grade essence gathering pill, rewarded by the system. Rhain gently pinched Marin's pale, lips open, and fed the pill directly into her mouth. The moment the flawless pill entered her body, it instantly dissolved into a gentle, soothing stream of extremely pure essence. It rapidly flowed through her dry meridian channels, nourishing her damaged organs and stimulating her blood production. Within the time span of a few seconds, the deathly pallor on Marin's face began to recede, replaced by a faint, healthy rosiness. Instructor Marin. Rhain. Footsteps echoed hurriedly down the slope of the ravine. Victor, Bria, Hale, and the three exhausted inner disciples scrambled down the rocky terrain. They rushed forward and quickly formed a tight circle around Rhain and Marin, their faces plastered with worry and dread. "Is Instructor Marin okay?" Bria asked, her eyes brimming with tears as she looked at Marin's blood-stained robes. "Instructor, please be all right." One of the rescued disciples sobbed, his eyes red with guilt and terror. Marin's eyelashes fluttered. She slowly opened her eyes, the pure essence of the pill having restored a fraction of her strength. She looked at the circled, panicked faces of her disciples, and then up at Rhain, who was still supporting her shoulder. A profound, unspeakable gratitude flashed in her eyes. "I am fine," Marin whispered weakly, forcing a comforting, tired smile for the disciples. "The bleeding has stopped. I just need a little time to recover. She just needs rest. The danger here is cleared," Rhain added flatly, his dark gray eyes sweeping over the group to settle their panicked nerves. Hearing their confirmations, all of them collectively sighed in relief. Those three disciples even dropped to their knees, weeping tears of gratitude. Victor stared silently at Rhain. His mood was incredibly complex. Ever since the humiliation of being effortlessly suppressed in the sect training ground, deep down in the darkest corners of his heart, a bitter, unwilling grudge had taken root. Just a day ago, Victor had stood proudly at the absolute peak of the inner sect. He had believed himself to be the unparalleled genius of the Azure Cloud sect. He had constantly told himself that one day he would bridge the gap and reclaim his absolute pride. But today, looking at the hundreds of massive, withered tentacles blanketing the ravine floor, Victor finally woke up from his ignorant delusion. Victor finally realized the undeniable truth. The gap between them was not a step, it was an unreachable mountain. While others were still recovering, Hale had stepped a few paces away, his eyes scanning the shattered remains of the core root Rhain had pulverized. His gaze caught a faint, alluring red glow emanating from the cracked earth. He crouched down, brushing away a layer of dark soil and withered vines. "What are these?" Hale murmured, pointing at the glowing objects buried within the shattered core. Rhain raised his head to look at that glow. He had also noticed it, but didn't have time to check them. Marin also turned her head. The moment her eyes landed on the faint red glow, her pupils widened. "Bring one of them to me," Marin's voice wavered. Hale didn't dare to delay. He reached into the dirt, carefully pinched a tiny, glowing seed between his fingers, and hurried back to place it in Marin's palm. Marin stared at the tiny seed that was not larger than a pearl. "It really is," Marin gasped in shock. "Crimson core seeds." Bria and Victor exchanged confused glances. "Crimson core seeds?" Marin nodded woodenly, her eyes glued to the tiny bead. "The plant that nearly killed us Must be crimson vein plant. I had once read about them in the sect library. She tightly gripped the tiny seed, her hands shaking. These seeds, they possess the ability to forcibly widen a cultivator's meridian channels and temper their bones to an unimaginable degree. Consuming even a single seed can permanently enhance a cultivator's innate talent several times over. Each one of these tiny seeds is a rare grade treasure. A rare grade treasure. The words exploded in the minds of Victor, Bria, and the others like a thunderclap. A single rare grade item could cause rivers of blood to flow in Gramus Town. Wait! Hale suddenly turned around and dashed back to the shattered core root. He agitatedly dug his hands into the dirt, brushing aside the withered bark and dead vines. A dazzling, blinding red light instantly erupted from the crater. Hale's eyes widened so far they nearly popped out of his skull. Oh God! Hale's legs completely gave out as he fell backward onto the rocky ground. Buried within the pulverized remains of the core plant were not just a few seeds. There were densely packed clusters of them, glittering like a sea of blood-red rubies. 100, 500, 1,000. There were easily more than 1,000 crimson core seeds. 1,000 rare grade seeds. Marin muttered in a daze. The sheer, incomprehensible magnitude of the discovery caused Marin to completely forget her severe, life-threatening injuries. She abruptly sat straight up, completely ignoring the tearing pain in her ribs. If our disciples consume these... Marin's voice trailed off. It was a treasure capable of altering the destiny of an entire sect. Marin slowly tore her gaze away from the blinding red glow and looked up at Rhain. Rhain, you killed the crimson vein plant. These seeds are yours by right. What do you want to do with them? Marin asked with desperate hope. Victor, Bria, Hale, and the three rescued disciples all turned to look at him. Rhain glanced at the glittering pile of blood-red seeds. To any other cultivator, this was a life-changing treasure. But for someone like him who possessed a flawless physique, these seeds were practically same as the ordinary pebbles on the side of the road. He could decide to sell it later. But right now, he wasn't in the state of mind to think about that. Gather them and store them for now, Rhain said indifferently. Hearing his casual command, Hale, Bria, and Victor immediately scrambled forward. Without caring about the dirt, they rapidly swept the glowing seeds into their spatial storage rings. Rhain withdrew his gaze and swept it across the group. Marin's face had regained some color, but she was still severely weakened. The three disciples who had been trapped with her were slumped against the rocks, trying to recover from their exhaustion. We rest here for a while, Rhain ordered. Bria and Hale looked at Rhain, their eyes overflowing with gratitude. They had been physically dying from exhaustion, but neither of them had dared to speak a word about it to Rhain. Leaving them to recover, Rhain turned and walked a few paces away, sitting down on the very edge of the rocky cliff overlooking the ravine. Rhain stared down at the dead vines, his expression unreadable, but his mind was in turmoil. Was it a mistake? The thought crept into his mind. Was it truly right to let Ceres enter this place? The Hollow Realm was far more merciless than he had initially calculated. It wasn't just the Iron Peak sect and the Barlow family lurking in the shadows. And if the human enemies weren't terrifying enough, the Hollow Realm itself was a literal death trap. His urgency to find her had spiked to an unprecedented height. He took out the tracking talisman. The translucent projection hovered in the air. Right in the absolute center of the map, 7 bright green dots were perfectly overlapped. His group, right now, their cluster of 7 was unequivocally the largest gathering of Azure Cloud sect members on the entire projection. Logically, any scattered Azure Cloud disciple or elder checking their talisman would see this massive cluster and change their trajectory to head straight toward them. That's why he decided to wait here for some time. He could only hope that Ceres was looking at her talisman and already making her way toward him. A few hours passed like this. Ding. Daily sign and available. Sign in. Chapter 44. Alliance. There was no difference between day and night in the Hollow Realm. Rhain didn't even realize that a whole day had already passed since they entered the Hollow Realm. Sign in. Rhain spoke, getting out of his bewilderment. Daily sign in reward. Rare grade artifact, Sunfire Orb X1. Effect. A one-time use explosive artifact forged by compressing extreme, volatile solar essence to its absolute breaking point. Upon detonation, it releases a destructive shockwave equivalent to the full-powered self-destruction of a peak spirit manifestation realm expert. Note: handle with extreme care. Once ignited, run. A wave of heat rippled through the air, and a small, glass-like bead appeared directly into the palm of his hand. It was perfectly round, roughly the size of quail egg. Sunfire Orb. Information regarding the artifact flooded his consciousness instantly. Peak spirit manifestation realm. In the entire Grey Mist town, the absolute strongest existence was Dorian Croft, only standing at the 7th level of the spirit manifestation realm. If this tiny orb were detonated in Dorian's face, even that tyrannical giant of a man would be blown halfway to hell. Rhain casually flipped his wrist, storing the glowing orb into his spatial ring. He slowly stood up, turning his gaze back down to the ravine. During these few hours, his calculation had proven correct. 2 separate groups had tracked the signal and successfully converged on their position. A total of 7 people had arrived. They consisted of 4 elders and 3 youths. Among them, 2 elders and 1 inner disciple belonged to the Azure Cloud sect. The 2 Azure Cloud elders were relatively modest in strength, at the 4th and 5th levels of the Essence Condensation realm respectively. The remaining 2 elders and 2 youths wore the dark, richly embroidered robes of the Graves family. The absolute strongest among all the new arrivals was the leading Graves family old man, Essence Condensation realm, level 8. When they had first ascended into the ravine and seen the hundreds of massive, pulverized tentacles littering the ground, they had been completely dumbfounded, but when Marin thoroughly detailed the situation, the newcomers' reactions were of total disbelief. Rhain hopped down the ridge and landed smoothly among them. "Are you all ready?" Rhain asked, his gaze sweeping over Marin and the others. They nodded. Marin, though still not fully recovered to her peak, had no problem following him. She had already heard from Bria and Hale that Rhain was actively searching for Ceres. Only Marin truly understood the weight of that. Back at the sect, Rhain had mercilessly crippled Galen just because he had hurt Ceres. If something were to actually happen to that girl in this damn place, Rhain would likely turn the entire Hollow Realm into a slaughterhouse. Rhain swept a glance over Bria and Hale. They had perhaps consumed their purple, striy soul fruits. Bria's aura had cleanly broken through to level 9 Essence Awakening, and Hale's strength had inflated significantly as well. Both of them were looking at Rhain with the kind of awe usually reserved for a god. But just as Rhain turned to leave, a bald, middle-aged man stepped forward from the Graves family group. Level 5 Essence Condensation. "Hold on," the bald elder said, his eyes darting greedily around the ruined ravine. "Instructor Marin informed us that you were the one who destroyed this plant. However, she refused to discuss the distribution of the loot. How exactly do you plan to distribute the Crimson Core seeds to our Graves family?" Rhain frowned. Apparently, Marin had dodged this idiot's questions earlier, simply telling him that Rhain would decide the loot distribution. Rhain had no mood to pay attention to him. "We can discuss that garbage later," Rhain said flatly. "I have more important things to do right now." The bald elder stilled for a second. Then his face flushed red. "Garbage? What could possibly be more important than splitting the Crimson Core seeds? We are allies." Before Rhain could even tell him to get lost, another voice interrupted. "Shut up." The leading level 8 Graves elder snapped, glaring daggers at the bald man. This level 8 elder was one of the few who had personally watched Rhain make that absurd bet with Harmon and fight 4th Elder Tauren. While the others were highly suspicious of Marin's story about Rhain defeating the giant plant, he had absolutely zero doubts that Rhain had solo killed the giant plant. Rhain completely ignored the bald man. "Listen closely." He crossed his arms and swept a cold glance over everyone present. My first priority in this hollow realm is not to hunt for treasures. It is to find my friend, Saris. He paused for a second. If any of you are here just to scramble for treasures, don't follow me. I have no interest in dealing with internal conflicts later. Understand? Rhain uncrossed his arms. Who is willing to follow me? Silence fell over the ravine. Without a single second of hesitation, Marin, Hale, Bria, Victor, and the three original disciples strode straight up and stood behind Rhain. They owed him their lives. They were wholeheartedly convinced. To them, following Rhain was the only guaranteed way to survive this nightmare. As for treasures, Bria and Hale believe that they have gained enough from the Hollow Realm already. The two newly arrived Azure Cloud Elders and their disciple exchanged complicated looks. But in the end, sect loyalty won out. They quietly walked over and joined Rhain's side. Now, only the four Graves family members remained isolated. The bald elder, Garen, gritted his teeth, his face turning completely ugly. Are you all mad? Garen spat. We came to the Hollow Realm risking our very lives to find treasures and resources. You want to waste precious time searching for a single missing girl? He turned his gaze fiercely toward Hale, who was standing firmly behind Rhain. Hale, get over here, he ordered sharply. You are the leader of our Graves family youths. You are coming with us. Hale didn't even look back at him. He treated the bald elder's words like a fart in the wind. The bald man choked, his face swelling with anger. But before he could shout again, the leading level 8 Graves elder let out a heavy sigh and stepped forward. We will follow Rhain as well, the old man announced decisively, instantly silencing the bald man. Rhain looked at them and merely nodded calmly. Good, then let's move. Rhain took out the talisman from his robes. The translucent projection instantly hovered in the air. He lowered his head and looked at the glowing green dots on the map. The distribution had completely changed since the last time he checked. Out of the 30 sect members that had entered the Hollow Realm, 10 of them were already here. As for the others, there were 2 other distinct clusters remaining. One group of 4 in the eastern side, another group of 6 sitting right in the absolute core of the Hollow Realm, with a purple node for his location sign and also pulsed. That accounted for 20 people. He shifted his gaze to account for the remaining 10 Azure Cloud members. Rhain's expression darkened. 8 dots were completely stationary, just like Tobias. That left only 2 dots moving alone. We are heading to the east, Rhain stated, tucking the talisman away. He turned and looked at Marin, Bria, Hale, and the others. There's a group of 4 about 30 miles out. We'll regroup with them first. No one objected. Even Garen, the bald Graves elder, merely kept his mouth shut. They moved out. Underscore. Meanwhile, deep within the absolute core of the ancient Black Hollow Realm, the gravity was overwhelmingly oppressive, easily 5 times heavier than the outside world. Every single step required a conscious circulation of essence just to keep one's internal organs from rupturing. Swoosh! A sturdy figure tore through the air, landing firmly on a blackened, rocky ridge. 4th Elder Tauren. His robes were stained with a few patches of blood, but his essence condensation peak aura surged powerfully, completely unaffected by the environment. Tauren reached into his robes and pulled out the location tracking talisman. Right in the absolute center of the map, just a few miles away from his current position, was a tight cluster of 6 bright green dots. 6 of them, Tauren murmured, a heavy sigh of relief escaping his lips. As the elder leader, the heavy burden of keeping the Azure Cloud sects members alive weighed entirely on his shoulders. Knowing that 6 of their people had managed to regroup and survive the initial chaos of the core was a massive reassurance. Tauren put the talisman away and shot forward. He needed to secure that group immediately. After moving swiftly for a few minutes, Tauren's sharp eyes caught a familiar silhouette. Elder Jorlin. He saw Jorlin's mouth opening. Tauren, but the words never left his throat. A blinding, blood-red arc flashed directly behind Jorlin. Jorlin, watch out. Torin roared, instantly erupting his aura and lunging forward to save him. It was completely useless. Squelch! A chilling sound of tearing flesh echoed in the dead silence of the core. Jorlin's body violently stiffened. His desperate, terrified eyes remained locked onto Torin for a fraction of a second before the light within them was completely extinguished. Before Torin could even reach him, Jorlin collapsed forward, his lifeless body crashing heavily against the rocky soil. Jorlin! Torin roared, his eyes instantly turning blood red. The tyrannical, suffocating pressure of a peak level 9 condensation exploded from his body like a golden hurricane. Swoosh! 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 One by one, dark figures blurred out from the boulders, completely surrounding Torin from every conceivable angle. More than a dozen men. Torin's heart plummeted into his stomach as a sharp gaze swept over them. Every single one of them exuded the dense, oppressive aura of a top-tier expert. Not a single one of them was below the 7th level of the essence condensation realm. The horrific reality of the situation instantly dawned on Torin. The cluster of 6 green dots on his tracking talisman had been used as a bait. Suddenly, the crowd of elites parted, and 4 figures stepped to the very front. The head elder of the Barlow family. 2 peak level 9 elders wearing the gray robes of the Iron Peak sect. And standing dead center, draped in dark gray robes, was the final figure. His face was obscured by a mask, leaving only a pair of dead, emotionless eyes exposed. Essence Condensation Realm, Level 9. 4 of them. The masked man walked forward until he reached Elder Jorlin's lifeless corpse. Crack! Without a shred of respect, he lifted his heavy, iron-toed boot and stepped squarely onto the back of Elder Jorlin's lifeless corpse. Torin, Vargas sneered, his growly voice charged with sadistic joy. We meet again. Chapter 45. Vargas's Identity, Mother of Kerr. Seeing Elder Jorlin's lifeless corpse being humiliated under Vargas's boot, Torin's eyes burned with bloodthirsty, killing intent. Torin roared. The ground shattered as he shot forward. His fist, carrying the absolute, unreserved limits of his peak level 9 cultivation, aimed directly at Vargas's skull. Vargas's dead eyes narrowed. He pushed his own blood-red essence to its peak, raising his arms to meet the devastating blow head-on. Boom! The collision shattered the rocky ground beneath them. Before Torin could press the attack, the other 3 level 9 experts moved. The Barlow head elder and the 2 Iron Peak elders struck from the sides and rear, their auras erupting in unison. Simultaneously, the remaining dozen experts surged forward, raining blades and concentrated essence down on Torin from every direction. Surrounded and outnumbered, Torin fought desperately. Bang! 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 He deflected a descending sword and shattered an incoming palm print. But there were too many. Blades sliced his arms, and heavy punches battered his ribs. Blood sprayed across the rocky ground as he frantically traded blows with the overwhelming force. A heavy palm slammed into Torin's back, breaking his stance. Torin stumbled forward. In that fraction of a second, a figure slipped into his guard. Vargas! Squelch! A sharp dagger pierced straight through Torin's chest. Vargas twisted the hilt and kicked him away. Torin stumbled. His legs gave out. He crashed to his knees, utterly exhausted, his breathing ragged as dark red blood rapidly soaked his robes. How does it feel? Vargas, standing over him, spoke. Torin ignored it. He lowered his head, staring at the blood pooling around his knees, and estimated how much strength he had left in him. He merely spat a mouthful of bloody phlegm to the side. The next second, a heavy boot smashed directly into his ribs. Torin was violently kicked to the dirt. The head elder of the Barlow family, Byron, stepped forward, his expression completely twisted with rage. Jarek, Morbin, Pyron. Byron gritted his teeth. Were you the one who killed them? Torin gave a bitter laugh. He bared his blood-stained teeth in a grin. Dead? Good. It's just a damn pity I didn't get to wring their necks myself. Byron's expression turned incomparably ugly. "You piece of trash," he cruelly spat. "I will personally kill both you and Roderick, tearing you apart piece by piece." "No rush." Vargas chuckled. It was a harsh sound. He stepped in front of Torin, looking down with an easy, casual tone. "Are you confused why you're not dead yet?" Vargas didn't wait for Torin's response. He reached up to grab the dark cloth mask and tore it off. Torin froze for 3 seconds. Then his brain crashed. Hideous, centipede-like scars crisscrossed the man's entire face, completely warping his features into something monstrous. "Vargas!" Torin's eyes widened as if he'd seen a ghost. He knew that face perfectly. Decades ago, the Scarlet Fang bandits had been the most ruthless, bloodthirsty plague in all of Grey Mist Town. And this man was their undisputed leader. Torin furiously turned his gaze toward the Iron Peak and Barlow elders. "You shameless bastards." Torin gritted his teeth. "You parade around as righteous factions, but you secretly collude with a bandit." He spat again. Utterly disgusting. Samuel, the male level 9 elder from the Iron Peak sect, merely threw his head back and laughed. "Righteousness." He looked at Torin with absolute disdain. "That ridiculous so-called righteousness is exactly why your Azure Cloud sect is decaying. And it's exactly why you will be completely wiped off the map soon." Vargas sneered, his dead eyes burning with venom. "Back then, because of you and your righteous sect, my brothers were slaughtered. I had to flee Grey Mist like a beaten dog." Vargas stepped closer, his oppressive aura pressing down. "But now, I've returned just to watch your entire sect burn to the ground." He looked down at Torin. "I'll keep you alive, Torin. I want you to sit here and watch as every single elder and disciple you brought gets murdered. I want you to feel that despair." Vargas didn't waste another word. He raised his hand and waved. "Bring them out." 5 people were forcibly dragged to the front. 4 of them were bound tightly in heavy essence sealing chains. Azure Cloud sect elders. They were covered in blood and injuries, looking absolutely miserable. But the 5th person wasn't chained. She stood there, her flawless face deathly pale, her silver-white hair completely disheveled and tainted with dirt. Saris, standing right beside her, his hand resting casually on her shoulder, was Valerius. He had a mocking sneer plastered across his face. Torin's pupils contracted. His heart bled at the sight. "Vargas!" Torin roared, his voice tearing his throat raw. "May you rot in the deepest level of hell." Vargas merely chuckled. "I'll start by executing every single one of them right in front of your eyes." One by one. Torin struggled wildly against the boots holding him down. "I'll kill you." Vargas threw his head back and laughed aloud. "Just kidding." Vargas crouched down, his scarred face inches from Torin's. "They're still breathing because they still have value." His tone turned ice cold and absolutely ruthless. "If you want them to live, you're going to do exactly what we say. Underscore. The journey eastward was swift and completely silent. Rhain's team hardly faced any obstacles on the way. Now, they were less than a mile away. But before they could cover the remaining distance, a sudden, earth-shaking roar reached their ears. It wasn't just one. Grayer, cree-I-scree. As they approached closer, the very ground beneath their boots had began to tremble. Marin and others halted on their tracks. "This scale," Marin whispered solemnly. "A beast tide." "We can't go in there," Garen yelled. "A beast tide will trample us into meat paste." "Keep up," Rhain ordered coldly. "It is our people," Rhain stated, his voice slicing through the rising panic of the group. "They're trapped right in the center of it." Without a single millisecond of wasting time, his figure flashed forward. Marin and the others swallowed their sheer terror, drew their weapons, and desperately rushed after him. Moments later, Rhain broke through the tree-line and came to an abrupt halt at the edge of a massive, bowl-shaped gorge. Marin, Hale, Bria, and the others stumbled to a stop right behind him, looking down into the valley. The moment their eyes registered the scene below, their scalps went completely numb. The gorge was entirely flooded with ferocious beasts. There were more than 100 of them. Massive shadow wolves the size of horses, iron-scaled panthers, and towering four-armed apes. Their realms were not very strong. Most of them were only comparable to Essence Awakening realm, but their sheer number made them frightening. Their eyes filled with a maddened, blood-red light as they swarmed forward like an unstoppable force. And right in the absolute dead center of that terrifying sea of monsters, a desperate, bloody battle was taking place. Down there, Bria pointed with a trembling finger. Surrounded on all sides, completely cut off from any route of escape, was a small defensive circle of cultivators. Rhain's dark gray irises narrowed slightly as faint golden rings ignited within his pupils. There were exactly 10 people trapped in the center. 4 of the trapped cultivators wore the tattered, blood-soaked azure robes of their sect. All 4 of them were the elders of the Azure Cloud sect. Fighting along them were 6 Graves family members. And standing at the absolute forefront of the defensive ring was a figure wielding a heavy, broad-bladed sword. Roderick Graves. Saris wasn't there. Rhain clenched his fist tightly, a dense, crushing aura releasing from his still body.